Before we get started, please go over to Amazon.com and grab a copy of my book, Education and Justice. If you have an African-American son in public school, you need this book because I teach you the many ways that public schools mistreat African-American boys and what you can do to help your son. So go over there and get your copy immediately. Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. I am Reverend and Civil Rights Attorney Augustus Corbett. So what I want to talk to you about in this video is one of Trump's DOJ nominee. She is being nominated to be over the Civil Rights Division of the DOJ. It is a position that Kristen Clark held under the Biden administration, a very, very important position. And the NAACP Legal Defense Fund has come out against her nomination. And I oppose her nomination too because of the importance of the Civil Rights Division of the DOJ. So let's go to a letter that the NAACP Legal Defense Fund wrote in opposition to her. So they addressed this letter to the Majority Leader, Senator John Thune, Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, the Chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Chuck Grassley, and Dick Durbin, the ranking member. All right, and so this is just February 26th, and Miss Harmet Dillon just had her confirmation hearing. The senators are going to be voting on her nomination not long from now. I wanted to do this quick video so you can call your senators and tell them, do not vote, do not affirm this particular nominee. This is letter in opposition to the confirmation of Harmet Dillon as Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights. Dear leaders Thune and Schumer, Chairman Grassley, and Ranking Member Durbin, this letter expresses the Legal Defense Fund's strong opposition to the confirmation of Harmet K. Dillon as Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights. The Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, CRD, touches the lives of nearly every American. CRD is responsible for an array of important functions such as safeguarding the fundamental right to vote and enforcing federal laws that protect individuals from discrimination. The head of CRD is charged with investigating potential violations of civil rights, including discrimination in education, employment, housing, federally funded programs, and the rights of prisoners and persons with mental and physical capabilities. The Assistant Attorney General must serve as an impartial advisor to the Attorney General on all civil rights matters. So we see here that this is an extremely important position. If some civil rights violation occurs with someone out on their job or in school, et cetera, then it's going to end up in her office if the person files a civil rights complaint with the Department of Justice. So she's got to be on point. She's got to be someone who understands and promotes civil rights, not someone who has a particular bent or ideology that's in opposition to civil rights as it is traditionally understood and practiced. And that is the concern of the Legal Defense Fund, that she doesn't have that understanding. All right, let's go back to the letter. Ms. Dillon portrays herself as a civil rights lawyer who makes it her job to fight what she refers to as, quote, the woke mob, close quote. Now that tells you a lot right there. That lets you know right there that she is not going to be on the side of us who consider ourselves woke. And by woke, that means that we are aware and we fight for racial justice. So she's not going to be on our side if a situation goes in front of her office, because she's going to consider us what? Woke. And we are woke, but just not the way she probably thinks. The letter goes on to say her conception of civil rights, however, is fundamentally flawed. It ignores the rights of Black and other marginalized communities who have experienced discrimination since the formation of this country, instead focusing on perceived unsubstantiated grievances primarily of white men who object to respecting the rights of Black and brown people, women, people who identify as LGBTQ+, and other marginalized individuals. All right, the letter goes on to say the person holding the title of Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights must lead CRD in upholding its mission, which is to protect the civil and constitutional rights of all people, vigorously defend the Constitution and federal laws, and ensure equal justice and opportunity for all. Ms. Dillon's attacks on voting rights, efforts to undermine protections against racial discrimination, and her demonstrated lack of impartiality and independence make her wholly unfit to serve as the Attorney General for Civil Rights. Now, my main concern with Ms. Dillon is voting rights, as well as the police officers violating the civil rights of regular Americans, and they tend to be African Americans, okay? Because African Americans are more likely to be killed by police officers. So I'm concerned with, number one, voting rights, number two, police brutality, and then I would throw a third one in there, education. Now, speaking of voting rights, let's go back to the letter, and she did something in a case that I'm very familiar with that is very disturbing. All right, so Ms. Dillon's attacks on voting rights. Ms. Dillon's litigation through her private law firm, Dillon Law Group Incorporated, and an advocacy group she founded, the Center for American Liberty, has consistently sought to undermine Black political power and voting rights protections for underrepresented and marginalized groups. One example is her advocacy in Allen v. Milligan. Very familiar with that case. It arose from Alabama. Allen v. Milligan, 599 U.S. 1. It's a 2023 case involving a Voting Rights Act challenge to Alabama's 2021 congressional redistricting map. LDF, which has challenged discriminatory voting practices since its earliest history, argued Allen v. Milligan before the U.S. Supreme Court. In this seminal case, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that Alabama's 2021 enacted congressional map was racially discriminatory and diluted Black political representation in violation of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. Now, remember this case very well. It had to do with racial gerrymandering, and that is how maps are drawn for a particular state. Those maps can be drawn in a way that gives white majorities advantages and dilutes the voting strength, the voting power of Black Americans. And that's exactly what the court said happened here in this case, Allen v. Milligan. And basically what it was, Alabama has a large Black percentage of Blacks. And so therefore, they should have, a representative number of voting districts. But in this case, they did not. I can't remember the exact facts, but I think Alabama had almost somewhere around about 30% of the population. So that means that the voting districts should be consistent with that 30%. And if I recall, I think Alabama had 7 or 8 voting districts, and the voting map at issue in this case only had 1 voting district for Blacks in Alabama. And so they cried foul, filed suit, and the lower federal court agreed with them. It went to SCOTUS, and surprisingly to everybody, SCOTUS agreed as well and said that they should have at least 2 voting districts when Blacks represent about 30% of Alabama's population. I think I got those facts right. Okay, I'm doing this from memory, but I believe that's what happened. Well, she wrote an amicus brief that essentially disagreed with the Black litigants, plaintiffs in this case. All right, let's go back to the letter here and read a little bit more. It says, Ms. Dillon, through her private law firm, Dillon Law Group, filed an amicus brief in Allen versus Milligan, which urged the court to uphold Alabama's racially discriminatory congressional map. She argued that states such as Alabama, despite their long history of discrimination against Black voters, should be given substantial deference when faced with claims of racial discrimination in drawing congressional maps and that creating 2 black majority congressional districts in Alabama would violate equal protection. Wow. Wow. Ms. Dillon's defense of Alabama's racially discriminatory map is a direct attack on black voters in Alabama who make up roughly 1/3, so I was right, of Alabama's population and their ability to elect candidates of their choice. The litigation in Allen v. Milligan established that a congressional map with only 1 black opportunity district unlawfully diluted black voting strength and denied black voters an equal opportunity to elect candidates of their choice to office. Ms. Dillon's opposition to providing black Alabamians with equal representation and political power underscores her unsuitability for the role of Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, a division charged with upholding the voting rights of all people. I would strongly concur with the LDF's opinion that she is not the right person for this position. I mean, how in the world could you expect, as an African American, to get equal justice from a person who thought that Alabama map should nonetheless have been upheld despite the facts and the law? No way. So I wanted to bring this to you and ask you to call your senators, both of them, even if you live in a red state or blue state for that matter, it doesn't matter. Call them and tell them to vote against the nomination, Trump's nomination of Harmit Dillon. Vote against her. Vote no on Harmit Dillon. She does not need to take the place of Christian Clark because her position in this Allen versus Milligan case is just unexcusable. All right? So that's what I wanted to share with you in this video. It's very, very, very important. If it wasn't, I would not waste my time or yours. Vote, call your senator and tell them to vote against this woman. All right. Thank you for watching this video. I am Reverend and Civil Rights Attorney Augustus Corbett. And remember, stay woke.